and call to order the October 11th, 2022 regular monthly meeting for South Grandma Water and Sewer Authority. We're a couple of members, a couple of board members down tonight. We have one that is taking a planned vacation, and the other one, Tim Karen. Tim's wife underwent surgery yesterday. It was about a 10-hour procedure. She's recovering in the hospital, and Tim is spending time with his wife as he should. So we want you to all keep Tim in your thoughts and prayers. And with that, we welcome everyone here tonight. But with that, we will have a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. And as you mentioned, I was notified ahead of this meeting that Mr. Karen and Mr. McKellar would not be here this evening. So of course, I will not call their names. But the roll call this evening, Mr. Way, Mr. McLam,
Present.
Ms. Jordan,
Present.
Ms. Kaczynski,
Present.
and Mr. Gooch.
Present. We have a quorum, so we can conduct business tonight. And with that, if you will, everyone please join me in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we humbly come before you, thanking you for all the blessings you've allowed us to enjoy in life. With our faith in you, we know you will guide us through all situations and challenges. We pray for guidance and wisdom while conducting business for the South Grandma Water and Sewer Authority. May we balance the needs of our water and sewer system with the needs of our customers, employees, and stakeholders. Guide us to make the best possible decisions for the present while planning for the future. Grant our customers and stakeholders patience and understanding as we work through all the challenges we face. Lord, you know often hard decisions and sacrifices have to be made to meet the needs of all involved. May we make those decisions with grace and understanding. We pray all these things in the name of your Son. Amen. Amen. And now join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there any adjustments to the meeting agenda? If not, we'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Now review and approval of minutes from the September 13th, 2022 meeting. Is there any questions, any comments on the minutes from September 13th? If not, we entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 13th meeting.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second? Second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion is approved. Mr. Troy, do we have any public comments? Anyone signed up or sent in any public comments for tonight?
No one has signed up for this evening, and I checked my email up until the meeting, and we've not received any public comments.
Okay, thank you. And now we have board discussion items. Anyone got anything on the agenda for discussion tonight?
I have anything on the agenda, Mr. Chair, but I'd like to ask Mr. Schroyer a question just to clarify something.
Okay.
Mr. Schroyer, we've had emails back and forth from Mr. McKay in Creedmoor, and he just wants to make sure that we are testing the water and that the Department of Environmental Quality is involved and they have began their testing. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. That's what I needed to put on the record. I appreciate that.
And Mr. Hamlet, our engineering director, will actually have an update during his presentation this evening as well to let everyone see what the status is.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, if that's all, then we'll move on to our fiscal year 21-22 2022 audit report. And we have a presentation from Ms. Carleen Evans of Winston Williams, Creech Evans and Company LLP. And I think, Richard, you want to start us off?
Brief introduction, yes, please. As you are aware, we have to have an annual audit and an audit each year. This year, the board awarded the annual contract to Winston Creech Evans and Company. I think this is the third year of audit contract. And of course, I had the pleasure to work with Carleen Evans again. She was the lead auditor on the audit. She's here tonight to present the audit to the board. But Carleen and I are available to answer any questions during or after the presentation. After the presentation and the questions are done, the executive director recommends that the board act to officially receive the audit report for fiscal year 21-22. And I'll turn it over to Carleen to do the presentation.
Thank you very much. I was coming to present the audit for the 2022 year, and I probably say this year all the time when I'm doing that, just so you're aware. If we go to the first slide, I want to start out by saying we did not have any findings for the current year in the audit report, and we did have an unqualified opinion. And we submitted our audit to the LGC for approval on September 19th, and it has been approved. Starts with the government-wide statements. This is Exhibit 1 in the audit report, which is a statement of net position. You see the total assets and deferred outflows for the year were $95,828,000. I'll say that right, $95,828,000. I think I said that backwards. Total liabilities and deferred inflows were $35,815,000, which gave us a net position at the end of the year of $60,013,000. The total assets and deferred outflows were up $2.2 million over the prior year. That's primarily an increase in capital assets of CIP. We had the water treatment plant upgrades completed, and those were capitalized, and we had ongoing CIP for the I-85 sewer project. One thing you may notice different if you look at this Exhibit 1, under the non-current assets this year, there's a line listed as right to use lease asset. It's booked on the books at $496,449. This is new this year due to the implementation of GASB 87, where we have to book leases. There's also a corresponding liability in close to that same amount, so it doesn't have a huge effect on the statement, but it is there. The total liabilities and deferred inflows were down $2.67 million from last year, and that's mainly due to a decrease in the debt for the debt payments. So overall, the net position for the year was up $4.89 million. The next slide goes to Exhibit 2, which is a statement of activities. You see the revenues for the year were $15,100,000. The expenditures were $10,204,000. That gave us a change in net position of $4,896,000. That was an increase of $1.66 million. And I'll show these in a little bit detail later on, but the majority of that was water revenues were up $428,000. Wastewater revenues were up $563,000. We had contributed capital for the IEI stormwater agreement of $152,000, and we had ARPA grant funds of $237,000 included in those revenue numbers. Next, we look at the revenue on the non-GAAP statement, and this lists the revenues out by source. 38% of the revenues were water, which were $5,659,000. 56% of the revenues were from wastewater, which was $8,509,000. In small percentages, but the other category had $467,000 in it. The ARPA grant was $237,000. We had gain on sale of assets of $47,000. We had investment earnings of $27,000, and then we had contributed capital of $152,000, which gave us total revenues for the year of $15,100,000. Then the next slide compares the revenues budget to actual. See, the original budget was $13,567,000. Final budget was $19,575,000. And then the actual revenues were $14,948,000. And you see that came in, the overall revenues came in $4.6 million under the final budget. Reason for that was the final budget included $5.3 million of ARPA funds in it. And we had 2 reimbursement requests for the year that were $237,000. That's why that number is lower. Next slide just shows the normal operating revenue. It's increased from last year. Wastewater increased $563,000, and water revenues increased $428,000 on a regular schedule. Next, we move on to the expenditures. This is also on the non-GAAP statements. 80% of the expenditures were operating expenditures, and that total was $15,229,000. We had bond debt payments of 8% of the expenditures, which was 1,523,000. 9% of the expenditures were loan debt, which was 1,818,000. And then 3% of expenditures were the town of Butler payments for 500,000, gave us expenditures of 19,071,000. And those expenditures were down 2.4 million over last year, which CIP was a little bit less than last year, included in those numbers. Next shows the expenditures budget to actual. The original budget had 13.78 million. Final budget was 27,380,000, and actual expenditures came in at 19,071,000. And that was a little bit lower than the final budget again, because the CIP was lower than the final budgeted numbers. Next slide shows fund balance. At the end of the year, 56% of fund balance was net investment in capital assets, and that totaled 33,756,000. 44% was unrestricted, which was 26,256,000. And we had ending fund balance for a total of 60,013,000. Then next slide just shows the cash end of the year last year versus this year. You see, we ended with 24,445,000, which was down 3.9 million from the prior year. Then I have a list of the loans outstanding. And there were no new loans this year. These were just still payments on these loans. Outstanding loans went down 1.436 million from the prior year because of the loan payments. And next were the bonds outstanding. Didn't have any new bonds this year either. Outstanding bonds balance were down 1,041,000 over the prior year. And then I'd like to say, that's all I have in my slides. I'd like to say thanks to the board for allowing us to work on this audit this year, and special thanks to Richard for all his hard work and us everything so quickly and in so good shape. And I'll leave it for questions. Anybody has anything for me or Richard?
Anyone have any questions? Then do I hear a motion to accept the,
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the 2021-2022 audit report as presented.
thank you. Do I hear a second? We have a second in two places. Any choice? Any discussion on the motion?
The second, please, Mr. Gooch.
Mr. McLean. Okay, any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Likewise, ayes have it. Motion carries. We've accepted your audit review report. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And then the next item on agenda number 10 is the I-85 sewer system improvement project. The financial overview. And we got two people in on this. Richard, you going first or Mark?
Mr. Gooch, I'll do the introduction.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Scott wants to get in on this too.
Okay.
Just going to take me a moment to
Family affair.
presentation.
Everybody jump in. Trust smile. Smile.
Can't be in two places at one time, so I'm just going to do the intro. this evening, board, and then
Not gonna run back and forth and flip the slides.
Yeah, exactly. So this evening, the team here, the directors are here to talk about that I-85 sanitary sewer system improvement project as far as the financial overview. So the board is well aware of the I-85 sanitary sewer project that we've been working on for the last 4 years as far as the overall design, and moving forward with actually selecting a design engineer, CDM Smith, to move us into the design portion. The board is also aware that we had a $50 million price tag on this project from the original estimate back in 2018. We secured funding via ARPA for $35 million this last year towards that $50 million project. The board also used that ARPA fund, some of that ARPA funding for the CDM design engineering contract, just over $5 million for that. And CDM Smith has been moving forward with the engineering design for that project. So as they've been working on that project and working on their route and looking at the cost of this design, especially with some of the inflationary factors that we see over the next 3 or 4 years that we're projecting, our costs, as far as our total estimated cost for this project, keeps going up and up and up. So we obviously knew from the beginning that we had about a $50 million project. We had $35 million from ARPA, which is great. But as we're looking at this project now moving forward, we see a greater amount of money that SGWASA needs to look at securing in terms of funding for this as far as loans. So the Finance Committee met on August 31st with staff, and we presented this presentation, if you will, to talk about the I-85 project just slightly, but actually then started to talk about the financial analysis and scenarios that we worked through with the Finance Committee. And the Finance Committee had a recommendation on what to do with that, and also to bring this discussion back to the full board for a discussion. So this evening, we're going to go through this presentation. I'm going to ask Mark Hamlet, our engineering director, to come up first just to kind of roll through a couple of slides on I-85. And then I'm going to ask our finance director, Richard Ballmer, to come up and walk through the slides that he's presented. And the intent here is to provide you with enough information for additional conversation and comments and any questions that you might have here. And at the end, potentially get a direction from the board on how to proceed with this project. One of the important screens that you see up right now, as far as our slides here, is just kind of an overview of some of the key points that I just brought up, and I'll just review those again. So our estimated total project costs prior to design was about $50 million. Our current estimated project costs, including construction inflation factors, is $16 million plus. We have an ARPA grant funding of $35 million. And we have debt financing requirements of $35 million. We've looked at debt financing considerations from the USDA and also the NC State Revolving Fund, or SRF. At this point, unless the board has any questions for me, I'd like to bring up Mark Hamlet, our engineering director. Mark?
Okay, I'm just going to share a couple of slides which you had seen in the past. This is an overview. The diagram just shows the overall scope of the project, the most recent updated sketch. This shows the construction of 3 new lift stations, taking 6 lift stations offline. The purple lines represent gravity interceptor lines that are going to be installed. We've got a northern interceptor. That's a gravity, about a 30-inch line that's going to run through the northern portion of the town of Butner. We've got the southern interceptor line. That's a gravity line that's going to be a 30 or 36-inch line, which runs through the southern portion of Butner and goes over to the I-85 interstate and crosses under that. And then the dashed yellow or orange lines on the screen that represent several miles of force main ranging from about 8-inch up to, I believe, 24-inch. So that's the overall scope of the project. With that, we'll go to the next slide, which is the projected schedule. This is the same schedule that I presented at the last board meeting, which shows taking us through data collection. That's the land surveying, which is going on right now. The design, 30, 60, 90, 100% steps along the way, permitting, and then the final, you see the bidding and award with a anticipated bid date November of 24 right now. So that is a brief overview of the project before we bring Richard up to go into the financial part. If we want to have questions on the scope of that project.
So you have 6 abandoned old lift stations in the diagram,
Correct.
and we're going to 2 new. So that's going to be 2 new that take up the work of all the others.
Well, three new. So we're abandoning 6 and we're adding 3 new.
Oh, I see the third one now. Okay.
So what we're doing, we're routing. If you look at the southern interceptor line in particular, there's 3 red boxes that are on that line. We're routing the gravity line to go under or near those lift stations, so that instead of those being required to pump as they are now, the flow that drains to those are just going to go directly into the new gravity line. So we'll be able to take those offline, and but they're no longer needed.
So the Robinson Creek lift station that we put a new pump in already, that one that's going to be taken down?
No, that is we'll actually be talking more about that one tonight as well. But that lift station is, if you look at the diagram, it's off the page to the right. It's not part of this project.
That's what I was looking for. I'm like, I don't see it. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Forget about all that stuff. Now we're gonna do the fun stuff, numbers. The finance committee has seen most of these numbers, but they may be new to the rest of the board. So what we tried to do was determine, as I mentioned, 60+ million, maybe 70 million, 35 million is already accounted for with ARPA grant. So we're looking at potential of another 35 million that we need in funding. So what we tried to do is see how we could finance that and what effect it would have on our existing rates and existing expenses. So what we've prepared is a debt summary, a debt service table, and a few charts for you to kind of give you some perspective on what that debt would look like if we were to finance it. The first chart on the next slide. You'll have to bear with me. I'll switch between the screen and the thing because my glasses don't work for both. This is kind of a recap of what Carleen just showed you in the audit. This is just what our existing debt is. And I added a column to the side that shows you when the final payment on those debts, which I think is very helpful in knowing how long-term are they. Some of the debts you'll see at the bottom, the revenue bonds, you'll see the SunTrust bond is expiring in 26. BB&T bond to purchase Creedmoor is 27. So we do have some debt, and the town of Butler payment ends in 27. So you do see that we're going to have some debt dropping off in the 26 to 2028 time frame in the next 3 or 4 years. So the next slide kind of gives you more of a breakdown of what our current debt service in total looks like. And so you can see in the budget for 2023, the year we're in now, 22-23, including the town of Butler, 500,000 a year, we're at 3.8 million in debt service. One contrast I'll throw out from the audit is when Carleen was showing the chart of how much debt was in the cost of all of our expenses. If you added up the bonds, loans, and town of Butler, it was about 20%. That's skewed. Those of you who've been on the board for a while remember that it hadn't been 5 or 6 years ago, we were talking about 1/3 of every dollar goes back out to debt service. It still is at 28%. The 20% from her chart is skewed because it, as she kept mentioning, it has capital outlay in it. So, you know, if you took out, say, the water treatment plant, the I-85 project out of its operating expenses, then your debt service load in total operating expenses goes up. So it is still at the 27-28% mark, not 20%. So I wanted the board to understand that it's not now that 1/5 of our dollar goes, it's still 28%. So you see it starts at 3.8 right now that we're budgeted for. And you'll see, as we were just talking about, by 2029, that number drops to 2.1. So that's roughly a 1.6 million drop in debt service by the time you get to 28, 29 in that time frame. So what we decided to do was, how much money could we borrow? Could we borrow that 35 million, and what funding options would we have? And what terms could we get that may use that same drop in 1.6 million in debt to add new debt? So that we're basically keeping a flat line of debt going forward to fund the I-85 project. That was our goal. So with the next chart, you'll see that same data table in chart form. Some people like charts, some people like tables. I'm a table person, but we took that same thing and put it in a chart form and projected it over the next 10 years so that you could see that same data dropping and where that drop is. And you'll see the line that's drawn in 2029, where debt will drop 1.6 million per year. And if we didn't incur any new debt, you see that green line for total debt kind of flattens out and stays there for many, many, many years to come, because the biggest debt on our books right now is the wastewater treatment plant upgrade that occurred in 2015, which was 26 million. And so that debt's going to take a while to pay off. The next chart. So then what we did was, this is basically the same thing, but showing it to you in a different perspective. And it's just showing you that timing related to the project. So we're talking about debt dropping off in 28, 29 in that time frame. When would the project be ending and debt service on that project be starting if we were to fund it with financing? And this shows you that. So we anticipate that the repayment of any debt for that 35 million would start around 2028, about in that same time frame we're anticipating. The next chart. So then what we did was we took that 35 million and said, okay, let's look at the two funding sources that we think are available. The first being a USDA loan. And most of you know that a USDA loan is typically a 40-year term, which is preferable for governmental unit because it stretches the debt out longer. And so therefore you have lower debt payments. The other option would be DEQ funded, which is typically a 20-year. I think they sometimes do a 25-year loan, but usually 20 years. So this chart in the red, you'll see in the green our existing debt. And you'll see again in 2028 and 2029 where that debt drops. If we were to fund 35 million at 2.5% interest rate for a 40-year term, that's your red bar. That would be a USDA loan. And you'll see that 3.7 million in 2028 with the red bar is right in line with where our debt is currently. So again, your debt service is staying flat. Alternately, if you took a DEQ loan for 20 years, what effect would that 20-year versus 40-year term mean to us? And you see that debt service on a 20-year loan for the same amount would be 4.5 million. And you'll see that does go quite high and it increases your debt service. That would require some sort of revenue funding, likely in the form of some kind of impact on rates. And so you'll see that projected out all the way through. One thing about this chart, and I think this is pretty much the last chart, I will throw out that when we started working on these projections, it was well before the Fed started trying to kill inflation with raising interest rates. 2.5% for a USDA loan would have been totally reasonable when we started these charts. I don't see that happening if it were to happen now. If the rate is set in 2027, 28, who knows what's going to happen? It's kind of being kind of volatile right now, unpredictable. But I will throw that out there. And I did run some projections and I'll throw them out there. We don't have a chart for this, but I anticipated there may be a question. Well, suppose it was a 5% interest rate. If you were looking at borrowing 35 million, 40-year and 30-year, 40-year and 20-year, based on a 5% interest rate, what would the difference be? For that USDA loan, at 2.5%, you're talking about an annual debt service of 1.4 million. For a 5% interest rate, you're talking about 2.07 million. So it increases 2.5% interest rate to a 5% interest rate, adds another 600,000 plus on the annual debt service. The DEQ loan would be even more burdensome because it would go from about 2.2 million as shown on this chart. At a 5% rate, that would become 2.8 million. So as we're talking about dropping 1.6 million in debt, dropping off, we certainly wouldn't want to add 2.8 million in debt. So that kind of gives you some perspective on that. Scott, did you want me to continue with the other slides or is that something? Yeah, no, if you would, please. Okay, so the next slide kind of summarizes everything we've talked about. As of 6/30/22, SGWASA's principal debt balance is 32.5 million. That includes loans and revenue bonds. It does not include the town of Butner 500,000 because on the financial statements, that's not a true long-term debt. Existing debt service is approximately 3.8 million a year. We just talked about that for years 2023 through 2026, and then it will start declining. For fiscal year 23, I talked about a minute ago, that's still 28, slightly over 27% of total operating budget. So still more than a quarter of every dollar we take in goes out for debt. Existing debt service declines to 2.3 million in 2028. You saw that on the charts. It'll decline to 2.1 million by 2029, assuming no new debt. This remains close to the 2 million. So once it drops to about 2.1 million, it'll drop to 2 million right in that area, and it'll stay there with no new debt added through 2035. So we would see that 1.6 million decrease steady line all the way through 2035. Next slide. We talked about we've got an existing ARPA grant of 35 million that's already been awarded, and it's already been kind of earmarked by the board, if you will, for the I-85 project. And you've already awarded, as Scott said, over 5 million for the design phase. Assuming an inflationary rate of 7% or higher for the next 3 years, the total estimated construction and engineering cost for the project is projected to be closer to 65 to 70 million now. Therefore, SGWASA is reviewing funding options for the remaining balance of 35 million. The project may be scaled back or portions delayed due to the cost. As represented in the charts above, USDA funding offers a 40-year term, which would keep the annual debt service around 1.4 million, assuming that we could get a borrowing rate. A typical BEQ or commercial loan would have a 20-year term and result in an annual debt service commitment of about 2.25 million, assuming that same 2.5% borrowing. And then, of course, the disclaimer that I just mentioned, 5% in today's environment is not practical right now. It may be by the time we go back to actual receiving funding. Or it may not, it may continue to go up. Who knows what's going to happen, but that gives you some numbers. Next slide. If debt, so kind of in summary, if debt service payments could be deferred or not begin until 2028 or later, then debt payments for the new debt could potentially be offset by debt payments for the debt being paid off, keeping that flat line of debt service. As presented in the previous chart, this is likely possible for a 35 million USDA loan if we get a 40-year term and a 2.5% interest rate. However, new debt with a 20-year term, as you saw on that chart, even at a 2.5% rate, would result in debt payments higher than the sunsetting debt payments. That would likely require. What happened to the USDA grant funding opportunity? We worked diligently with USDA for 12 months regarding the grants and the funding opportunities for the project. In June 2022, the USDA informed us that based on the construction scenarios, the proposed and several financial hurdles that we had, it is likely that we would not receive grants from the USDA, but could qualify for low interest loans. They're very interested in working with SGWASA on a 40-year low interest loan program to fund the outstanding balance of the project. Why did we not qualify for the grant? The flow of the sanitary sewers goes through the entire project area, and it contributes to Butler, Creedmoor, and Granville County. And USDA required us to use the calculated median household income for the proposed project. Doing so would increase the MHI in excess of what their grant limitations would allow. If you go ahead and cover that, then I'll come back up. Okay, that's fine. So on the next slide, the director's recommendations is to design the entire sewer project to include all priorities, northern, southern interceptors, and pump stations. Prepare the bid documents with alternate bid items so that the projects can be deleted if necessary due to bid costs to meet the maximum loan amount approved by the board of directors. And then seek USDA 40-year low interest loan in the amount of $35 million. In October 2022, start the USDA loan application to pursue the maximum amount approved by the board of directors. And then the finance committee recommendation was in concurrence with the director's recommendation, and they recommended that we discuss the topic with the board of directors at this meeting to gain consensus on the loan amount. Thank you, Richard. So thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mark, for the presentations, and board, be happy to answer any questions that you have for your discussion. One thing I wanted to point out, I put this screen back up on here for you, screen 9. And I think this is a really important graphic, if you will. So what you can see on the screen here that we covered, as you can see in 2026 to 2028, let's just say out 26 to 29, you can see where our debt starts to fall off. And what we were looking at is, could we take that debt that falls off, that amount, and replace it with the USDA loan so that we basically have a net effect? So we're trying to go at this as far as revenue neutral as best that we can for this project. So there's been some discussion and concern by the board and the public as well about how long this project is taking. Why does it take so long to design? Why does it take so long to build? It's kind of a blessing in disguise if you think about it, because the way it times up, by the time we get through design and get through construction and the way our debt starts to fall off, as it does, it's really at a great point that allows us to be able to afford this project, if you will. And at the same time as debt is coming off, replace it with debt for this very important project moving forward. So again, that's why this graphic is very important. And we've signified that by showing you in the blue box, that's our design, bidding, construction timeframe. And then the green box, the sliver, is the debt payment starts within about 6 months of project completion dates. One of the things that really affects us on this project right now at our design is basically factoring in the inflation factors. So what we've done is we've taken kind of a conservative approach as far as 7% per year compounded over the next 3 or 4 years, because that's what we're anticipating that inflation to be at the time this project goes out for bid and gets constructed. So that's really on the tail end, if you will, of the cost, what's causing the price increase, if you will. So we're trying to project that, trying to understand that as we move forward. And of course, we're asking the board this evening for direction on this item to start seeking a USDA loan for 40 years for $35 million, just to make sure that we can get that approval. We apply for that. We don't want to exceed that. We want to stay underneath that value by all means. The application process with the USDA is very lengthy. The USDA is working with us to help us fast track it so that we can actually have all of our financing in place, at least have knowledge of that within about the next 6 to 9 months versus 12 months, which is fantastic. So we're in a good position in terms of the organization moving forward with this project, in terms of getting the financing locked down for us. What else would I like to add to that? In terms of the design, we did mention this in the summary at the end. Mark has been working with the design team, of course, to make sure that we're cutting costs and value engineering as we go. There's also portions that this project could be delayed if we need to do that by a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years. We're taking a look at that as well. So as we get this project designed and put together and we start to get these estimated costs together, when we go out for bid, as we've mentioned, we'll have this option or these various options that are bid so that we can see how these prices come in. And at that point, we can discern which way we go with this project, how much we build. Please keep in mind that we have to build the pipes before the pump stations. That's part of this. And we don't want to build a bridge to nowhere, quite honestly. So we'll have to take a look at those systems at the same time. But it's a huge project for us. There's a lot of decisions we have to make along the way, including this. This is a big decision. We had a great conversation with the Finance Committee. We spent at least an hour on this topic, talking about this, looking at everything. And I think that Richard, our finance director, did a fantastic job for us, looking at these scenarios and seeing how all this came together. So I'd like to conclude there and let the board, if you have any questions for staff, just let us know. We'll be happy to answer that, but just welcome your discussion as we move forward on this challenging topic. Thank you.
I have 3 questions. First one is, what is the most important parts of this project? Part. What would you have to do first and leave off certain parts to 1, 2, 3, or 4 years later?
Okay, let me just pull up a graphic. You want to talk through that?
Okay, so the purple line to the north, that northern interceptor line, that is a standalone portion. Nothing else in the project is not dependent on anything else on the project. So that's kind of a standalone piece. It could be delayed, but that's obviously one. There's a lot of that is severely undersized, and we really do not want to push that back. The next portion, the southern interceptor line, everything east of I-85 that you see, all of those other lines, depends on that southern interceptor line being built. So that gravity line must be built. That is the highest priority. It has to be built because nothing else east of 85 can work without that being upgraded. So you go farther east, you look at the Joe P. lift station. That is the centerpiece. That is the regional lift station that's going to serve all of Creedmoor. All of Creedmoor is going to flow to that point, or probably 90% of Creedmoor is going to flow to that point. So that lift station and the force main, the dash line coming from that running west, that is the backbone of the project that serves the whole Creedmoor service area. That has to be built. So portions that could potentially be delayed. So that I-85 lift station, the green box to the north there, that is the purpose of that is catching flow from the Creedmoor portion around 56, where Food Line, Tractor Supply, the fast food restaurants, all that area is capturing flow and pumping it to the south. A big reason for us doing that is if we take that flow off of the line, it helps the northern interceptor size. If all that flow is not diverted, then we would ultimately have to upgrade the northern interceptor all the way to the wastewater treatment plant. So you see where the red cursor is, that entire line, if we do not intercept that flow within 20 years, we would have to upgrade that entire section of line. So that I-85 lift station is probably the primary component that could be delayed. It cannot be canceled. It will have to be built at some point, but it doesn't necessarily have to be built with this project. So we can build the rest of this, but within the next 5 to 10 years, we really need to be thinking about that. Then we've got the East Middleton lift station, which is at the southern end. So we have not been accepting flow to that lift station. It is at capacity. So development in that area has been shut down for the last few years. So that is another portion that we consider that a high priority to be able to open up that area for development as well. So one other small piece that could be delayed, the Wilkins lift station, you see right in the middle of the drawing, that red box. So that is one of the lift stations that we want to take offline. And what is required to do that is just running a gravity line from there. So that purple line, that short section of purple line from the Wilkins lift station down to the intersection with the remainder of the southern interceptor, that is a portion that we would definitely bid as an alternate. That could be just taken out of the scope completely. That is trying to help us with operation and maintenance, getting rid of that lift station. Worst case, if we have to leave it, we can. Wilkins Road lift station could stay in service, but we would love to get rid of it if we can. So hopefully that answers your question.
One,
Same question. Which part of this is going to add more revenue to SGWASA?
read more one.
Add more revenue. I think that, let me just say this, that's a good question. I think that the best way to answer that would be that from what we can tell from discussions with developers in the last 3 years that are very interested in this project, we have development opportunities pretty much on the East Line Station Road area from 56 all the way down and out to the city of Creedmoor. And of course, based on those restrictions, there is no development occurring in that area, both county, city of Creedmoor, town of Butner. When Mark was just talking about the I-85 lift station project, I think what's important for the board to understand here is we're not putting any more water or sewage underneath I-85. So we're leaving that pipe the same up near the I-85 lift station. We have in effect taken our sewer system and kind of split it into 2 collection basins, if you will. So for example, when you look at the I-85 lift station on the east side of the roadway, there's the potential for that catchment area to be to the north and to the east. So if there's some development in that area in the future, that would provide that opportunity for growth. The same thing on the west side of the I-85, just opposite the I-85 lift station, there's an opportunity for, if there's a development further to the north and to the west in that area, for development to tie into that. So there's opportunities here for SGWASA in terms of operations and new customer base to really offer expansion potential in those areas. Now, I will also say that part of the analysis that CDM Smith performed for us over a 6-month period was to take the comprehensive plans and the zoning plans from all the communities and look at their 2040, 2050 plans, and also look at our strategic plan. And they factored in a lot of that land use and that potential development over the next 25 years to make sure that we are at least accounting for that in our design as far as our infrastructure, especially our pipes, as far as our main interceptor pipes that we have for both northern and southern. So I think you can appreciate that we have to build the pipes first before we do the other infrastructure. But there's opportunities here for SGWASA in terms of customer base and growth and revenue potential for us in those areas that I explained to you. So at this point, we do not have anything in writing that says anyone's coming to town yet to develop in these areas. We don't have those agreements. And keep in mind that SGWASA doesn't do that. We actually work with our communities. Those are our partners here, and we work towards their plans and support them with what their needs are. But we've had discussions in the last 3 years and a lot of discussions just in the last 6 months with a lot of developers and a lot of interest, if you will, to understand what's the timing of this project. And again, we talk about being maybe 2, 3 years, 4 years out as far as completion. Developers are looking at this as well, and they're making their business case on how they want to invest potentially in this area and how to time up that they may have something in the ground for development, if you will, at the same time that we're completing sections. So I know that's a lot of information, but there's a lot of variables here that we're dealing with. But I hope the board understands really what we've been going through as far as the analysis and the hydraulic modeling, to take a look at that, to make sure that we get the best investment and best return on our investment in the future as well.
So my last question is, you spoke of the 7% compounding over the years. And I'm guessing that's 3 or 4 years you were compounding. And are you still doing a 10% contingency on top of that?
I think we still have a 10% contingency factored into that. I'd have to look at that schedule to see where we are on that. Maybe Mark could answer that if it's different. We still have a 10%.
That's correct. I think that right now, our estimate has a contingency a little higher than that. As we get farther along into the process, that number comes down. I think at one point there was a 20% contingency, it may be a 15 right now as we start to refine the scope. And by the time we get into 60% design, I think we'll get it down to that 10%. But we will keep a contingency throughout the project.
That was all my questions. Thank you.
Mhm.
And, if I may add, we will not know how much this project is until it's bid. And the way I see it, you're putting enough flexibility into it that we can scale the project back, depending on inflation, depending on interest rates. There's so many variables we're dealing with right now and we'll be dealing with in the coming years. We can't predict the future, so we're trying to cover all the bases. And I know this is going to sound like a big number. The number may be that big, or it may be considerably less than that, depending on what happens with the economy, what happens with jobs, how hungry your construction companies are. If there's not many jobs available, they get a lot closer. If there's plenty of jobs available, they tend to factor in more profit. It's just part of doing business. So, I think that, you guys have done a great job of factoring everything in. You hit us with a big number, but you're doing what I would call worst case scenario on everything. And, you plan for the worst and hope for the best. Any comments?
I think that's kind of what we do in life.
Yeah, yeah.
So if I remember from the Brames Crossing designs that we approved and we all worked together on, they're putting a lift station in that subdivision to take some of the water flow out of the Paddington and Sotheby. All right. And I'm wondering, how is that lift station going to impact the Wilton lift station? I think in their design, there was a lift station.
Do you want to? Well, I guess you do.
So the Brains Crossing development is replacing the Sotheby's lift station. So that is proposing.
So it's 1 for 1.
Right. So it's the existing Sotheby's lift station is not deep enough to accept the flow from Brains Crossing. So they're proposing right now to put a new lift station in, which ultimately would get to the Robertson Creek lift station, which ultimately gets to the Joe P lift station that we're upgrading here. So I think you mentioned the Wilton or I don't know, did you say Wilton or Wilkins?
The Wilton lift station, I thought, is that what it says? Wilkins?
Wilkins.
Oh,
So-
Wilkins. I'm thinking Wilton. All right. Okay. Got it.
You're about 8 miles off.
I'm only off. All right, just a little bit. And we'll have a new administration before we even bid this project. So there is a chance that maybe our interest rates will get back in line with something reasonable again. There's a chance.
Slim.
Well, and I think that
Positive.
this is, the chairman said it, we're doing some worst case scenario planning here. And I want the board to appreciate that having this discussion now is good versus the bids just came in. We're $20 million over. We're doing things along the way, obviously to minimize that. So, but still a large amount here for this project. And again, if there's a different direction the board would like us to go in terms of the value or the approach, and our recommendation was with the USDA for the 40-year term for 35 million, just to make sure that we have that amount covered. And again, we're trying to stay in that sweet spot, if you will, as some of our debt falls off, we can replace that debt with this project. So it's not the only project we have in town. You're aware of that. It's just a major project here that really sets the backbone for this area.
And that 35 million ARP funds, that is being paid to us as we present invoices to them. It's not like it's sitting in our bank account collecting interest.
No, that.
It's like a construction loan.
That
We've
is
got to,
correct. Our finance director manages that along with our engineer. And I think that we've approved, I'm just going to look at Richard, 2 or 3 payments so far, reimbursements.
The fourth one today.
The 4th reimbursement so far. So as we get invoices from CDM Smith, Richard turns those in and then we get a reimbursement back from them for that. So that's actually in motion. So we are spending some of those ARPA funds as we're supposed to on this design. And we do have those ARPA funds to expand, and Mark has gone over the timelines for that construction. And hence, that's another reason for us to push out this project and work with the USDA on a compressed schedule and application, if you will, so we can get everything ready as quick as we can and get it out for bid. So if there's opportunities that we can start to build portions of the project sooner than later, we'll look at that. Mark has covered that for us in the past, where we've talked about some different construction packages, but now it looks like it's just one construction package for us to get out there.
well, we just found out in our meeting, the last meeting we had, that ARP funds can collect interest, which in the beginning they could not. So that's what Commissioner Way had said, is the money's in the bank, we'll get some interest on it. Yeah, no, it's not like that. It's like a construction loan. They've got the money set aside, but they give it to us as we submit invoices to
They
them.
usually don't let us make money on their money.
Yeah, they make money on their
City
money.
of Creemore's making money on their money.
Any other questions that we can answer?
Other with USDA loan.
Mhm.
When you put your application in, does that lock in an interest rate then, or does that vary depending on some sort of national average?
I do not know that answer. Richard, do you recall that? Do you want to come up and speak to that?
I believe it's locked in at the time that it's awarded.
Awarded,
Not at the time you apply.
okay. So,
So you're
wouldn't actually-
9 months away probably from that interest rate on that interest rate.
so would it be locked in when you actually,
I'm agreeing with you. That's my experience.
yeah, that it's locked in when
When you close on the loan.
when it's awarded?
You have a certain amount of time to close it.
That's right.
So it, now by awarded, you mean they approve it or we start to take funds from it? Okay.
Some, I haven't been that involved with this, but some USDA loans require private bridge financing too. I don't know if we're talking about doing that before we have a. So anyway, we'll back to the board with more details on that at some point.
Okay.
At what date are you applying for this loan?
Tomorrow, if the board approves it this evening, start the process.
And it should be awarded within 9 months? Is that what you said?
They have kind of said, Scott, that they're going to fast track it, right?
Yep.
Possibly 9 months.
Possibly by February, March.
So if the interest rate goes down, what do we do? Reapply?
No, you're locked in.
You're locked in.
Once you lock in a rate,
You could reject their funding, but good luck in going back with the handout. If you reject their funding and go back 9 months later and say, now I want more money. I don't think that's an option.
This uncertainty in the economy and rising interest rates works against us right now.
We'll ask that question with our partners at the USDA.
Okay.
We meet with them often, so I think that's a good question. Richard, if you want to note that, we'll just get some more information on that, please, and update the board.
Okay.
Regular update.
Anything can happen.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, comments from anyone?
I got one more question.
no, you had
You only
three.
get 3.
Well, I wrote down 3, but
Can you pique your interest again, Kenneth?
What I'm trying to get at is currently we have the 35 million. And we don't need this other 35 million right this minute. Is that
When do we
correct?
get a bid?
The reason I'm asking, I feel the interest rates and all this stuff's gonna go back down. But I don't feel it's gonna go down within 9 months. So you're gonna pay this high interest rate, getting money that you don't need right yet.
I think that let me do some more research on that as far as what our options might be, that if we get locked in 9 months and if it goes lower, that we have an opportunity to adjust down to that. Obviously, if it goes higher, we all want to lock in where we locked in. I understand that.
Yeah.
The thing that we just have to keep in mind is we don't want to get to a point where we're ready to do this project and now we can't get the funding for it because the 30 million won't cover it at that point. So, and we know some of the other options. Richard explained those this evening. The 20-year term really causes some
Your
issues.
debt payment way up.
So we can ask that question, but I understand it's a timing. I want to make sure we don't miss the open window for this application process, because I would like to tell the board we're locked in, we have this. Ideally, if we can lower that rate, if it lowers, that's the best position for us to be in. So we will ask that question. It's a long application.
Forgive it, like school loans.
It's a long application process. It's extremely detailed. So it'll probably take us about 3 or 4 months to complete the application. Take them probably 3 or 4 months to review everything. Plus there's documents that are required for the application that Mark and CDM Smith have been working on already that were required regardless of the type of loan or grants that we're looking at that are requirements. So we've been building those since August, I think, right? We've been working on those to satisfy those requirements of that loan document, if you will.
Thank you. Scott, what do you need from us?
I have a recommendation that the Board of Directors authorize and direct the Executive Director to complete the necessary documents with the USDA to secure a 40-year low-interest loan of $35 million for the I-85 Sanitary Sewer System Improvement Project. You can find that on page 33.
2.5%. I know it's not in your recommendation. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Okay, thank you, Board.
Thank you. And what is the pleasure of the board?
Reluctantly,
And
I
wants to wait.
believe that we have to do this.
Yes.
But
We're going into recession. This is not the time to take out a loan.
that's
But
correct.
I understand what you're saying.
We don't have any choice.
That's correct too.
What's the matter, Jim?
Rock in a hard place.
I was gonna say that, this is all complicated and if we were all
Yes.
able to game that, we would probably all be at Goldman Sachs and
Yes.
That's true. That's true.
prices may go down, interest rates may go up, but interest rates are still historically low compared to where they have been in the past. So
And you have a good point, Jim. They are historically low to what they've been in the past.
I've seen 8.5%.
Yeah, I've paid that.
been in a false interest rate environment where it's been usually lower. So
Right. Reluctantly, I'll make the motion that we do that.
Reluctantly, we second.
Second,
Either one doesn't matter.
okay.
I was going to, I know it's already been seconded, but may I recommend an amendment to your motion?
Yes, sir.
I would like I would like us to give a nod of the head for them to begin their paperwork process, because we are all in agreement that
Mhm.
we're going to have to do it.
Yeah.
But as far as a vote, I would like to get the answers that Mr. Troy is going to ask about. Can we lower the interest rate? Are we locked in at a certain time?
Before we have a hard vote.
you don't have to accept it until you get the offer back, correct? So it's a long time before you have to vote to actually lock yourself into anything.
We apply for it, then they come back to us and we.
And then we
at
tell them,
that
no,
point,
that's
we
too
just-
high. We don't want it. And they say, okay, well, don't come back and see us again.
Yeah, don't come back.
Once they started, we're locked in.
probably game it a little bit that you don't. Yeah, you could.
Would the board feel more comfortable if we returned our answers to the board and tabled this item, brought it back to the next board meeting?
Would that be too late?
I-
Would that be acceptable to you?
I think you want to get the application process started as soon as possible because it's such a long and complicated process.
That was gonna be my recommendation, but if it's the will of the board, then
Not gonna change the interest rate.
we
It's
would-
not. It's
I
just
would
gonna
withdraw
cost
my
you money.
amendment and go with the original motion.
Federal budget year too.
Pardon me?
You want to get the application in early in the federal budget year because,
Starts October 1st.
right, so
we're
Okay.
at the front end of that.
you want to, otherwise the money will be gone.
I want to keep the motion as it stood.
I'll keep my second.
And Commissioner Way, you withdraw your
Amendment consideration, yes.
amendment consideration. So, all right, any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed
Reluctantly.
likewise. All right, motion carries.
We reluctantly say aye.
We don't have a choice.
Now let's move on to item number 11.
All right, now we'll talk about the Robertson Creek Lift Station that we've mentioned several times tonight. So this lift station is located approximately a half a mile east of Holly School Road in Creedmoor. This is a major lift station in our service area and is a triplex lift station, meaning it has 3 pumps. It had 3 60 horsepower pumps that were originally installed in 2012. Earlier this year, one of the 3 pumps failed at that lift station. And in May, we brought an agenda item for your approval to have that one pump replaced. Unfortunately, since that time, the 2 remaining pumps have developed issues, one of which is no longer working anymore. And at this time, we would like to replace the 2 failing pumps with 2 new pumps. So this lift station can move back to 3 fully operational pumps as it was originally designed. So we have procurement procedures about informal bidding of projects. This project, we have decided to move forward with purchase. The reason for this is that there's only one provider of this pump anywhere around us. Any other contractor or pump manufacturer or pump provider that we've talked to would have to get the pump from Clearwater Incorporated and then mark that up to us. So we are proposing the sole source purchase of the pumps from Clearwater Incorporated. So we have got a quote which is included with this agenda item for 2 new pumps and the installation for a total of $66,500.60. So the recommendation tonight is SGWASA staff recommends for the purchase of 2 new pumps and installation from Clearwater Incorporated is a sole source vendor. Schedule wise, following your approval, we would sign the quote and authorize Clearwater, give them a notice to proceed. The pump will be ordered and installed just as quickly as possible. Financially, this was not an item that was budgeted for, so it would require a budget amendment. We are requesting a charge of $73,150.60, which includes the $66,500 for the new pumps, freight, and installation in the quote, plus a 10% contingency of $6,650. And this item is being presented after this as budget amendment number 5. Attachment include the proposal from Clearwater Incorporated. The strategic plan alignment, this falls in line with focus area number 2 of providing a reliable and sustainable sanitary sewer system. And finally, the executive director's recommendation is that the SGWASA board approve the purchase and installation of 2 new pumps for the Robertson Creek Lift Station from Clearwater Incorporated for the not to exceed amount of $73,150.60, excluding local and state taxes. So with that, I'll take any questions.
I have a question. A lot of times I continue to hear sole source. I'm guessing we're replacing this pump, with the exact same pump. So on the new pump stations that are being redone, are we looking at possibly getting pumps that are not sole source? As long as we continue to get sole source stuff, they're gonna eat you alive.
You're right. And Clearwater Incorporated, we sole source the pump in May so these are the same folks that we used before. So working with C.D. Smith on the I-85 project, we are specifying multiple pump brands. I don't know that any of them will be sole source. We're giving multiple options for contractors. And we want pumps that are regularly.
Usually the issue is the first time they're gonna sell it to you, they're gonna give you a great deal. Cause they know you gotta come back and get it from them. And that's when they're gonna eat you up.
I agree.
That was the only question I had.
So sole source is the manufacturer of the pump.
You can only get it from them.
Yeah.
You can only get it from one source.
Nobody else sells that pump. You have distributors throughout the whole country.
But they go back to them.
Correct.
Somebody's making money.
If you would, just keep in mind that the hardware configuration for these pumps, these flanges can be changed and modified to allow a pump, whether it be smaller or larger. In this case in particular, what's the depth of that pump station, Mark?
25 feet or so.
So in certain situations, we look at that and say the cost to go in there and change that plumbing, if you will, to accommodate flanges or a new pump is a cost we don't want to bear at this point. We'd rather spend it on. But we do have those situations where if it is accessible, we can make some changes and get some different pumps in there, if you will, to allow us to not get caught in that situation, if you will. And then Mark is also looking at in the design of the I-85 project and all the pump stations that we're working on, as well as you'll see in tonight's presentation about the sewer model we've done with SIM. We're looking to, if you will, kind of standardize some installations and pump configurations. So it's more of a plug and play and more variety of pumps that we can put out there. Right now, we've got non-standard across the board. So we're trying to get past that as well in the next couple of years. Thank you.
And also, Mark, if you, then the state set the requirements for the pump curve. Will they approve your pump size, your pump speed, your pump horsepower, your pumping curves?
You have to design the lift station based on actual flow plus a peaking factor. So it's 2.5 is typically the peaking factor, so that whatever the design flow is, you have to design the pumps to handle 2.5 times that. So it can handle any iodine, any inflow infiltration to the system. So we have design standards that we have to meet when we don't just arbitrarily pick a pump. It has to be sized.
The size of this pump station, is this similar in size to Joe Pete Road or smaller or
Right now, it's larger.
larger than Joe Pete Road?
So this is one of the 3 largest we have, I believe. Joe P, when replaced, will be the largest by far.
Yeah.
But it's one of the 3 largest that we have in our whole service area right now.
And Robertson flows to Joe Pete. So how can a bigger pump station flow into a smaller one without a problem?
It's part of the Cadillac system.
Stop it. Is that the El Dorado Cadillac?
That's why Joe Pete is at capacity right now.
No, in all fairness, you bought it.
Who bought it? Were you here? when it was
I
bought?
wasn't here.
Okay, all right. I wasn't here
Sam
either.
voted against that.
See that?
Okay. We've kind of digressed a little bit here. Any other questions from Mark? Not do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we approve budget amendment number 5
Well,
and give the executive director authority to purchase and install 2 new pumps. at
Just going above.
Robertson Creek Station in a not to exceed amount of $73,150.60.
So that's 2 motions in one. Is that correct? Because we hadn't even discussed number 12 yet.
Yeah. This is item 11.
You didn't want to do it all at once?
We can. Yes, ma'am.
Richard,
to
can
ask
we do it
Richard.
all at once? No.
Yes, I'll have to defer to the attorney.
All right. Let me dial it back.
Dial it back for us.
I make a motion that SGWASA Board approve the purchase and installation of 2 new pumps for the Robertson Creek Lift Station from Clearwater Incorporated with a not to exceed amount of $73,150.60.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed likewise. You got me all confused. Motion carries. Now, on to the budget amendment.
You're giving away.
You wanted your moment in the sun. I know, I see that.
And Mr. McLean is Chandler Finance Director. The first thing I said is sole source. You see how this works. Mark spend the money, and then I have to come up and beg for you to move. So this is the fifth budget amendment. It's for the Robinson Creek pump stations. There's no need to go through a lot of detail on it because we've already discussed it with that item. But you'll see the previous budget amendments 1 through 4, 21,657,186. With the increase in fund balance transfer of 73,000, it's appropriated fund balance of 73,150 for this item. Increase in the expenditures for the utilities, pump stations and towers, 73,150. Reporting documents are behind there on the next page. And just a note that including this budget amendment, that will bring the transfer of the unappropriated fund balance for this fiscal year, 3 months in, to 2,376,285. The recommendation is that the Board of Directors approve budget amendment as presented.
You don't need the 60 cents.
I'm gonna
Throw it in.
60 cents through that account with another budget item.
All right.
Under $1, I won't fight you over it.
Okay.
Over $1.
Make a motion, we approve that.
Motion to approve. Do I get here a second?
Second.
Oh, we got 2 seconds. We can go with, we can,
Linda have-
oh, Linda Jordan, second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise, motion carries. And we're down to project status updates. Mark, you back on?
I am back. And I appreciate the fact you wanted to skip over Richard and keep me up here, but I'm glad he got the opportunity.
Just give him 60 cents before you leave tonight. That would be okay.
He'll try to take more than that from me, I'm sure. So next up is the utility projects update. Typically, we would talk about the I-85 project, but we're going to skip that since we've already talked a lot tonight about it. So on the agenda tonight, you see these 5 items here. We have a STEM sewer model, which is brand new for you. Lead and copper rules, the Bowman Road fire hydrant projects, the PFAS project, and a update on digesters 1 and 2.
My favorite subject.
Your favorite. So the STEM sewer system hydraulic model. So this is one that we started back last year. We contracted with our on-call engineer, McGill Associates, to develop a hydraulic sewer model that would evaluate the sanitary sewer system. And we started to focus here on the town of STEM. We had the water model, which we started on the eastern side, started in Creedmoor. So with the sewer model, we decided to start that on the western side and work from STEM back towards the east. Using the GIS data and all available sewer and lift station as-built drawings, we developed an overall model of the STEM sewer system. We performed drawdown tests at all of the lift stations throughout the town of STEM service area. And we use that to calibrate the model and run scenarios with the hydraulic model. And the results from that model show the capacity within each lift station and help identify major deficiencies. And I'll add something to this. This model, before this, we really did not know exactly how much capacity every lift station had in it. So if a development wanted to come into the system, we'd have to run models specifically for that development. And this model allows us to, now we know exactly what capacity we have throughout all of the town of STEM. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So this shows the area of the hydraulic model. As I mentioned, the town of STEM service area. And that includes 10 sanitary sewer lift stations. You see all those listed here in the yellow rectangles. Next slide. This is just a flow diagram showing the different areas of the STEM area, which lift stations they flow to, and then ultimately the route that the sewer takes to get from each of those areas through the series of lift stations back to our wastewater treatment plant. Next slide. So some of the major deficiencies identified, we found that we have extremely poor condition pumps in several of the lift stations. You see those 4 lifts listed here: East Tally Ho, Franklin Street, Prestwick, and School Street. And then the Prestwick lift station is a major deficiency, as it is a designed 220 gallon per minute lift station. and it discharges currently to the Franklin Street lift station that has a smaller pump of 50 gallons per minute. That's obviously a problem, and that's something that needs to be resolved. Next slide.
So we get a budget amendment next month for more.
It's
To buy some more of them pumps.
These sole source pumps.
It'll take more than a month.
It's about 10 of them.
So this is, this shows some, I've got 2 slides here to show some of the results. This shows the sewer lift station inventory and assessment. This gives the main points to notice here are the pump conditions and the pump level of operation. So you can see the 2 columns to the right, see the pump condition, you can see very poor, good, and so forth. And then on the far right, you see comments on the pump operation level. So you can see right there with Prestwick, when we tested those, we were below 10% of design capacity on those. Then you see some good ones like Mangum Farms #1 and Mangum Farms #2. Those are operating at the design point. So you can really see here.
Brand new.
They are brand new. So they should be working well.
Should be working a lot. Yeah.
So you can see here the wide range of pump conditions. So obviously from this, we can further develop our capital improvement plan on replacing those pumps. So the next slide, this is where we can actually see the capacity in those lift stations. This is really what we can use as we allow future development to come into the area. So this shows the pumps at the design condition and the pumps at the current condition. So for example, you see stem main in the green box there. Under the design capacity, it can accept another 385 gallons per minute. That's a substantial amount of flow. With the current flow, with the current efficiency of the pumps, it can accept 196 gallons per minute of flow. So that's a wide range there, but we're still in good shape there. But then you can see East Tally Ho, which is that was identified as having poor condition pumps. So under design, we'd have 63 gallons per minute of flow it can accept. But with the current pumps, we're actually in the hole 0.6 gallons per minute. So that lift station needs work. So this chart here is really for me, the most important thing. It really shows us the flow that we can accept all of these and help plan for future growth. So this model, this is our sewer model for STEM. I've asked our consultant to provide a proposal to extend this modeling effort onto the town of Butner and then ultimately to Creedmoor. So I want to have this data through our entire system for all 48 of our lift stations. So
Just a comment. I provided the board this evening with a hard copy report for that entire study that was done. So they have that as a takeaway this evening as well. If there's any questions by the board, please let us know. Additionally, what you're seeing here that we're going through with our different models, we're going through asset management, which is really the first step. You've got to understand where the assets are. And you've got to understand their condition and their capability. So all these charts that we're putting together that you see tonight, whether it be water or sewer, is basically our baseline data. So once we start to see some of these anomalies, we can say, well, what do we need to do to fix these things? And how does this model work together? And why is there a greater capacity upstream than downstream? In addition to that, it helps our teams in the field to know that you can't just take a 50 horsepower pump and throw it into a pump station that's supposed to have a 200 horse pump in it, those type of things. So we're working on getting that straightened out, if you will, by doing this type of analysis through the entire system. Thank you.
Prestwick has got the very poor pump condition. Is it anything to do with the fact the pump is overhead instead of submersible?
we really need to get into that and investigate. I do not know the answer to that.
Because it's the only one. That's all.
It is a different style pump than the rest. We're not sure yet. We've got these results. We just need to start digging into this and really find out why. That concludes the sewer model. So if there are any questions, we'll move on to the lead and copper rule division. So we talked about this at a couple of board meetings. Ultimately, the EPA passed lead and copper rule revisions in December of 2021, and the rule outlined 8 items that all water systems must complete before October of 24. And the list of those items are here. I'm not going to read through all of these, but a major component of this is just the identification of the materials of all of our service lines determining if we have lead and copper service lines going to all the residents' homes. Next slide. So project schedule for this, we issued a request for qualifications in July of this year. Statements of qualifications were submitted by 3 consulting firms in August. We have reviewed those statements of qualifications. The top 2 were neck and neck, and we decided that we wanted to hold interviews to select the most qualified consultant. Those interviews are scheduled for October 26th. And we anticipate that we will present the draft contract for board approval in November. Well, hopefully November, but it could potentially be December before we do that by the time we get through interviews. That is basically the update for that. I don't know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer. Okay, next up is the Bowman Road Fire Hydrant Project. This is a project that the board voted to approve the contract to Pipeline Utilities back in August. We had a pre-construction meeting on August 31st, and due to some material delays, we could not start immediately in September. So that construction is actually set to begin next Wednesday, October the 19th, and we anticipate completion of that project by the end of October. We don't think it should take more than 2 weeks to finish. And ultimately, that is going to replace a fire hydrant, water service, 3-inch water meter, and abandon some existing piping and water service in a concrete vault. So if there are no questions on that, we'll go to the next. This is the PFAS investigation. So we have been working with the consultant Hazen and Sawyer on the PFAS management project. The scope of services that we have received from them and have a signed contract is a PFAS sampling and analysis plan, overseeing the sample collection, the sample analysis, board meeting, which they, at the last board meeting where they were here and presented and discussed this, and then final analysis and interpretation of the PFAS results. So that's the overall scope of the project. We'll go to the next slide. Schedule wise, they are currently working right now. They don't have it complete yet. I checked in with them yesterday, and they should be finished with this pretty soon, but they're working on a sampling analysis plan. We're looking at having quarterly sampling, and that will be so December, March, June, and September. And we're looking at having samples at the lake in a couple of locations, and also some of the tributaries coming into the lake. So if there are PFAS contaminants coming in, we can really nail down which area that is coming in from. We're looking at May of 23 interim PFAS results presentation to the board. And then by November of next year, have a PFAS technical final memorandum to the board. I think a question came up earlier about DEQ and their testing. We are working with Division of Environmental Quality on testing and analysis. We're coordinating with them. They are going to be performing those. Division Water Resources team started testing on September 26th. They will collect raw data and treated samples. So that's raw water coming into the lake and looking at water from our treatment plant and running the PFAS test on that. So we're doing everything we can on this right now. We consider this an important topic. So we know there's a lot of interest, and we're really pushing this hard, and it's important. So on the PFAS.
So our consultants are going to give us quarterly updates. Is that correct? Okay, is DEQ going to give us an update as soon as they get their test results done?
Yes, they will.
Do they anticipate or give you a timeline on when they will have the first results ready for us?
They have not given us a date. I know the testing is in progress, but they haven't given us a date. I mean, we can check in. I can provide an update on that at the next board meeting.
Yes, sir.
If I find something out, we can send an email out.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I have a question for our attorney. The information that has been put out on social media by citizen in our water service district that is striking fear in the hearts of other customers. How far do we go with this before we consider it? In my opinion, it's borderline terrorism. We are scaring the heck out of customers, and we're not even 1/3 of the way into it yet.
think I'd rather discuss something like that in executive session.
Okay. All right. But that's my concern.
The last update is for the wastewater treatment plant digesters number 1 and number 2. So last year you saw many pictures and updates from digesters 3.
I saw them in person.
Saw them in person. And so over the past week or so, this time of the year is the right time to drain digesters to let us put our eyes on what the piping looks like. So we drained and cleaned and inspected digester tank 1 and 2, and to look at the condition. So we'll go to the next slide, and you can imagine what we saw, considering it was installed at the same time as 3 and 4, the same materials. So this is tank number 1. You can see from the picture on the left, the lateral pipes there are bowed. They should not be bowed and warped. They should be straight. So that is warped, similar to 3 and 4, not quite as bad.
Not as bad.
Not as bad, but it's still warped. And then you can see the header pipe there on the diagram on the right, that is warped as well. One thing that we noticed right there at the connection on the header pipe, that is starting to crack as well. So I don't think this is something that we need to replace immediately, but within the next couple of years, this definitely needs to be on our capital improvement plan. The next slide shows pictures from tank number 2, which you can see the same thing here. You can see the warped lateral pipes on the right and the header pipe on the left. You can see how it's warped as well. So everything there should be straight. It is not. Tank number 2, we could tell that the header pipe was actually shifted away a couple inches from the connection point on that 90-degree bend. So it's actually pulling away, and if it pulls away, then the digester will be offline. I think we're fine for a year or 2, but like I said, we need to get this on the capital plan. But I just thought about giving that update tonight to let you know what's coming down the line. So that, I'll take any questions on that or any other project updates.
So do you feel like this can wait a year, possibly 2?
I do.
They're just going to clean the diffusers and put it back in service.
Oh, they're already back in. So we've
Already
back. They're already back in service now.
Going to cost more money.
We don't know.
All right.
You can.
Who's in office?
Me, Scott?
Okay, thank you, Mark. If there's, comments from our executive director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, I'd like to thank our finance director for working with Carlin Evans of Winston Williams Creech Evans and Company LLP. And Richard did a great job for us this last year managing our finances. His organizational skills, his record keeping, his preparedness greatly assisted the auditing staff this year, again, in performing their audit. So Richard, thank you so much for that. Additionally, thank you for the financial analysis on the I-85 sanitary sewer project. It's great analysis. It really helped us make some good decisions and recommendations. Mark, thank you for your presentations as well this evening and moving us forward with all of the digital technology and the sewer models and the water models that we're working on. Board, Crystal Lee, our public information officer, is in the audience. You saw her snapping some pictures, and she's preparing for her duties as the board secretary. So she did a lot of the setup for us this evening and the preparation. She did a fantastic job. So we might pass the baton to her in December in a couple of meetings. So she's
Congratulations.
excited about that. So Krista's doing some great work for us. If you just look at any of our social media, whether it be Facebook now, Instagram, Twitter, am I missing anything else? No. So she's doing a great job for us on a lot of projects. The PFAS topic, she actually took the presentation from Hazen and Sawyer and the board discussion and put together a special video production, and that's on our website as well, so that anyone can listen to that. Very informative, great discussion. And you will see in our minutes this evening from the previous board meeting, a lot of dialogue, a lot of questions going on to do that as well. So some great information in there. So the board members, again, thank you for your approvals tonight on the projects. We appreciate it, and we'll get started on that USDA application and provide answers back to the board regarding your questions on that topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Wren, any comments from our attorney tonight?
I don't have any at this time.
We do have one personnel matter for closed session for discussion. And with that, we'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to go into closed session. We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll reconvene in closed session. We're back in open session and now we'll go to our comments from our board members. Commissioner Way, you have any comments for us tonight?
Just echoing my sentiments from those other times. We've had water main breaks and some other issues, and our staff has continued to go out in the weather and excel and work hard. We appreciate everybody out in the field. Appreciate the administrative staff and Mr. Balmer and getting the audit stuff finalized and taken care of. And as always, Mr. Hamlet for staying on top of all of our operational issues he's working on. For sure. Thank you as well.
Thank you. Commissioner McLam.
I just want to say, thank you for Mr. Schroyer and Mr. Hamlet's be joining, STEM Town Board at their next meeting to go over the STEM sewer system hydraulic model a little deeper than what we did this evening. I want to thank them for making themselves available to come out and kind of give us the rundown as to what to look forward to in the future.
That's all I have. Okay. Councilmember Jordan. Dr. Linda.
I just echo what Commissioner Way said regarding staff and Scott. Everybody's doing a great job and they continue to do so. So just appreciate them doing that.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Kaczynski.
Again, everything, getting us through Hurricane Ida. The updates that Scott sent out, just staying on top of all that. We know that we're getting into the winter months and I pray it's not as bad with water line breaks as it was last year, but just want the staff to know that we do appreciate the hot, the cold, the morning, the night, the midnight, the overnight hours that they all put in, and hope that they really do understand how much we do appreciate them.
Thank you. And I just thank everyone for your comments. I just want to echo that we do appreciate all that Director Schroyer does, all of his staff. We really appreciate the people in water and sewer that go out and dig and repair, and they go in all kinds of weather, any time of the day or night, and in all kinds of weather, and we appreciate what they do for us. And with that, is there any further business to come before us tonight? If not, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Jordan,
Anybody want to stay?